Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. Today's topic comes from the subreddit WomenInNews, posted by user MSMolio. The post is a linked post that goes to the NBCnews.com website. The title of the post is, "Why is the, quote, Right to Contraception Act, end quote, considered necessary?" Before I read the article, I want to say that it's very important that you get out and do some research on this for yourself. I'm doing a video on this and a transcription of this merely to provide accessible news to everyone regarding this very important topic, especially if you are a biological woman. The NBC News article that they linked is titled, "Congress to Vote on Federal Law That Would Protect Access to Birth Control." Subtitle, "Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, there has been confusion whether states can revoke access to some forms of contraception." We scroll past the picture of birth control. Underneath the photo, there's a caption that reads, "Some conservative lawmakers have argued that some types of birth control can be used to induce an abortion." This was written on June 5th, 2024 by Caitlin Sullivan. For the second time in 2 years, Congress is considering a bill that would protect access to contraception at the federal level. If passed, the Right to Contraception Act would codify the right of Americans to have access to birth control pills, patches, and implants, condoms, intrauterine devices, parentheses, IUDs, and parentheses, and sterilization procedures, including vasectomies. It wouldn't eliminate religious or personal belief exemptions, which allow healthcare providers to refrain from prescribing contraceptives to patients and insurance companies to choose not to cover them. Section: Why is a bill considered necessary? Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, there has been confusion about where certain contraception methods stand and whether states can revoke access to some forms of birth control. Some conservative lawmakers have argued that IUDs and emergency birth control pills can be used to induce an abortion. Already, legislation has been discussed or proposed in Idaho, Missouri, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Michigan aimed at restricting certain types of contraception, specifically IUDs. An IUD is a device inserted into the bottom of the uterus that causes the mucus in the cervix to thicken, which makes it difficult for sperm to reach and fertilize an egg. It also thins the lining of the uterus, making it difficult for an egg to attach in the rare event it is fertilized. Emergency contraceptives prevent or delay ovulation, preventing fertilization, and do not elicit an abortion, the World Health Organization states. House Democrats introduced and passed the Right to Contraception Act in 2022, at a time when Democrat Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House. But the Senate never held a vote on the bill, stalling action. House Democrats on Tuesday made moves to prevent this from happening again, this time in the House, by proposing a discharge petition. The petition, which would require support from at least some of the GOP House members to pass, would force House Speaker Representative Mike Johnson, a Republican, to hold a vote on the matter. The legal right to contraception in the United States is currently protected by two landmark Supreme Court decisions similar to Roe v. Wade: Griswold v. Connecticut and Eisenstadt v. Baird. Legal decisions related to contraception are based on the outcome of these cases, a concept called jurisprudence, but the precedent set by these cases is open to interpretation, potentially allowing new court cases that would restrict contraception access to hold up in court and set new precedent that could favor restrictions. That is what happened to Roe v. Wade with the 2022 Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision. Quote, "This bill does not force people to prescribe contraception. It does not force people to take contraception," end quote. said Dr. Dara Cass, an emergency medicine physician in New York and former regional director at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Quote, "This bill guarantees that if someone wants to take contraception, they will be able to have access to contraception and that access cannot be revoked." End quote. Regarding a 2022 version of the bill, some Republican politicians, including Florida Representative Kat Cammack, said the legislation is not necessary, calling it a fear-mongering technique led by the Democratic Party. However, Justice Clarence Thomas said in 2022 that the Supreme Court should revisit and overrule past landmark decisions, including Griswold v. Connecticut. Quote, "What concerns me about not having a law is there are very clear indicators that there are some folks, including some Supreme Court justices, that have shown an appetite to overturn the Griswold case in the same way they overturned Roe," end quote, said Mindy McGrath, Senior Program Director at the National Family Planning and Reproductive Health Association. Section: What happens next? If the Right to Contraception Act passes, which is extremely unlikely at this time, the bill would become a statute or a written law that would not leave what types of birth control are protected up to interpretation, said Kathy Hoke, Director of the Eastern Region of the Network for Public Health Law. The Act, Statute 4381, defines contraception as, quote, "any drug, device, or biological product intended for use in the prevention of pregnancy, whether specifically intended to prevent pregnancy or for other health needs, that is approved, cleared, authorized, or licensed," end quote, under certain sections of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act or Public Health Service Act. In the likely event the bill does not pass, quote, "it brings attention to the issue," end quote, said Hoke, who is also a professor of law at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law. Congress can also again propose a bill to protect contraception. For now, access to contraception, outside of religious or personal belief exemptions, is protected by the existing landmark Supreme Court cases. Quote, "This bill is really intended to enshrine existing protections we already have into federal law," end quote, said McGrath. Quote, "but the Griswold decision still stands for now," end quote. As of May 2024, 14 states plus Washington, D.C. also have legal protection regarding access to contraception. Grassroots organizations are also working to continue to expand access to birth control, particularly in states with strict abortion bans. This week, as the Senate votes on the Right to Contraception Act, Joe Giles, Executive Director of Women's Fund of Omaha, is installing the organization's third sexual health vending machine in a restaurant in the city. The fund's first two machines, which offer emergency contraception for $8 and pregnancy tests for $3, have already been operating in the Nebraska AIDS Project and in a bar in the city's popular Benson neighborhood. Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen signed a state law last year that prohibits abortion after 12 weeks of pregnancy. Quote, "It's scary to think about the efforts that are trying to limit access to products that people want to use and that are safe and that are FDA regulated," end quote, Gill said. Quote, "In the face of that, we are innovating to make sure that people have what they need when they need it," end quote. That's a good quote to end it on. Quote by Joe Giles, Executive Director of Women's Fund of Omaha. I can understand the hesitation to contact lawmakers, especially if you believe that the federal government shouldn't be telling the smaller states what to do. In this case, this is a law that makes sure that women have the human right and ultimately the right to decide whether or not they should be able to give birth. You can't always control when you're going to get pregnant. You can't always determine when you want to get pregnant or when would be a good time to get pregnant. And there are cases where women's lives would be ruined if they did get pregnant. This law, while not while not protecting access to abortion necessarily, will protect access to contraception. Regardless if it's abortion in your view or not, it protects access so that women who are in vulnerable positions have the ability to decide whether or not they are able and willing and ready to go through with a pregnancy. It is critical that this human right, that is uniquely a human right that applies only to biological women, it needs to be protected. Please do your own research. Don't just listen to this transcription. Don't just listen to my thoughts. Go to the links that are provided below for this article as well as the subreddit. Read up on this law, or read up on this proposed law. Make your own decisions, and please contact your state representatives so that they know your opinion. That is all for today. Thank you for listening/watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, all of that, and I will see you in the next video.